What's up, everybody? It's Jordan from Wednesday Night Warhammer. And is Assimilation Swarm good now? I, I think it might be. We're going to talk about why that is with the new data slate changes that happened just very recently. Still talk about its strengths and weaknesses, of course, and talk about my philosophy when I approach playing the detachment on a tabletop for Warhammer 40k, of course. If you're interested to hear me ramble more about these very, very hungry space bugs, hang out with me while we go through the detachment. The detachment rule is Feed the Swarm. In your command phase, each harvester unit can regenerate one Tyranid unit within 6, including itself, of course. And then, depending on the unit that you're regenerating, you do two different things, maybe three. Either if it's a monster or just a singular model unit, um, it's going to heal a D3+1 wounds, which is very nice, of course. And then if it is an infantry model within a unit, then you're going to return one model at full wounds to that unit. And if that unit is an in the swarm unit, like Gargoyles, Hormagaunts, Termagants, you're just going to bring back 3 of them. So it's very strong ability, I think, being able to bring back all of these durable units, or just kind of hog primary a little bit more. But it is always under that caveat of it has to be within 6 of a harvester unit, which I think is where we're going to kind of little bit of a pitfall with the detachment, but we're going to work our way around it. So let's talk about those harvester units next. All right, so the harvester units that we have for the detachment include the Harspecs, Psychophage, Pyrovore, Ripper Swarms, and very, very recently, the Norn Assimilator. So it's pretty limited to the entire codex, which is kind of crazy. And if you think about it, before the Norn Assimilator was given the keyword, it was even more limited with just Ripper, Swarms, Pyrovore, Psychophage, and Haruspecs. I'm not going to talk too much about what that limitation means in this slide. We'll dive into that in full length later on into the video, but it's just something to think about, that it is on such a cohesive and combo oriented detachment. We have so few units to choose from that are harvester units. Talking about the stratagems, and this detachment has some pretty cool ones. The first one we got is Broodguard Impulse. After a harvester unit is destroyed, your entire enemy army gets +1 to wound the enemy that destroyed that unit for the rest of the game. Basically, your opponent kills a Ripper Swarm, and then all of your bugs look at that thing very angrily and are able to just kill it better for the rest of the game. It's a pretty strong stratagem. However, your opponent will always decide what units they activate into. I mean, I guess unless you could, that's a good point. You could charge your Ripper Swarm into a very gross melee army, and then of course that gross melee army or unit is going to kill your Ripper Swarm, and then they would be forced to get +1 to wound against. So maybe that's an idea to do. But besides that, especially if you're going against a shooting army, you can't force your opponent to shoot at your units. So it does kind of play like this little cat and mouse game. And you don't necessarily want to be just running out your other harvester units to trigger this. If it does happen, then of course use it. But it's not like I don't want to sacrifice my Haruspecs this turn 1 or something so that I get +1 to wound against, I don't know, some crisis suits or whatever. But anyways, it's a good stratagem, but be careful with being happy sacrificing your units. And speaking of sacrificing your units, a reclaim biomass. Just after a Tyranid harvester unit was destroyed, a Tyranid's unit within 6 of that unit may regenerate. And of course, something that I didn't talk about before is you can only regenerate once per phase. So just going through this detachment, I'm just reminding myself, and of course reminding the viewers right here, that you can't stack this with some other stratagems or enhancements that we might see later on. But this is also okay. I think it's a fine stratagem. Again, I'm not going to be excited about my units dying, especially since we're in assimilation swarm and our harvester units are so valuable, in my opinion, that yes, this stratagem exists and it might be something to use, but I'm not always going to be excited about using this, if that makes sense. Last but not least, the stratagem that I will be excited about using all the time is Tyrannoform. Command phase, stick an objective a unit is in range of that you control. Just sticky objectives. It's amazing. And you can do that with rippers. Just something has to be next to them because they're OC0, of course. And it really allows for you to just move about the battlefield and kind of force a primary war that your opponent probably doesn't want to hang out in. All right, here are the cool stratagems. Here, I feel like the other stratagems were pretty cool, but we've got some really good stuff in these set of 3 stratagems. First up, Ablative Carapace. A harvester unit gets a 5-up feel no pain after be selecting by an attack, and then they get a 4-up feel no pain if they are on an objective that you control. 4-up feel no pain for Harspexes, 4-up feel no pain for psychophages if you really want to do that, and maybe a Norn assimilator. In my opinion, this is probably me slamming a Haruspex on an objective and just telling my opponent to come deal with it. 4-up feel no pain on a Haruspex, it definitely gets to that breaking point where, like, are you going to be able to kill a Haruspex? Maybe not, honestly. And then if the Haruspex is able to stick around and regenerate and then get back some wounds, then that's pretty strong. I really like this stratagem. The only really downside is it's 2 CP, which is a lot of CP. However, it's a pretty strong stratagem, so I kind of understand the balance there with 2 CP. Next up, we have Secure Biomass. Unit gains lethals in fight phase, crits on 5s if that unit is a harvester unit. Again, this stratagem just says use this on a Haruspex and go to town. Reason why I think about the Haruspex just immediately is because it has I believe 18 attacks, 14 with the mouth tentacles, and then 4 big meaty claws. It's just strong, and with all the dice that you're throwing at your opponent, you're going to get more 5s and 6s, etc. There are some people, including myself, who are excited about the Tyrant Guard with a Hive Tyrant brick that just runs up and holds an objective. And you can give it fights first, which we'll talk about in a second, and then getting 5s. Getting lethals to hit on that unit with so many attacks and the Hive Tyrant. That's pretty disgusting as well. But I personally am probably most excited to use this on a Haruspex to get the 5s for the lethals instead of just the 6s. But very good stratagem as well, and it's just 1 CP, so we like to see that as well. Rapacious Hunger. 1 Tyranid unit that just destroyed an enemy unit, that unit regenerates. If that unit is a harvester unit, it regains its full amount of wounds. So I believe this is one of the only cases where your non-harvester units can just regenerate without harvester units being around. I think that's pretty strong. So if you're running like Tyranid Warriors or Gene Stealers or something and you've lost 1 or 2 of them, you're able to just get that back pretty quickly. I think this is a strong stratagem. It's just 1 CP, get something back. Honestly, prefer to regrow an infantry model within a unit than to just give more wounds to like a monster, to a Haruspex or something like that. Like that is also good, yes, but honestly, if you think about it, there's going to be more number of shots that are going to need to go into a unit to kill it if there's multiple models, as opposed to just 1 big model, especially if you're going up against a high damage weapons. But 3 really good stratagems. The enhancements in this detachment are very strong and often kind of direct what kind of build you are going to be doing with your army list based off of what enhancements you're excited about. The first one is Regenerating Monstrosity. This cannot be used on a unit with monster models in it, so something like Hive Tyrant and something like the Neurotyrant unfortunately aren't going to give the full benefit of this. The Bear's unit can regenerate twice. That means Gene Stealers can get back 2 Gene Stealers, Tyranid Warriors can get back 2 Tyranid Warriors. I think this one's okay, but honestly, those 2 units, oftentimes when they're sent out, they're probably going to die in your opponent's turn before you're actually able to fully make use of the double regeneration. So, 20 points. I'm not super excited about this just because of that fact. Next up, we have Instinctive Defense. While within 6 of a harvester unit, the bearer's unit can heroically intervene for free. In addition, it has fight first while within 6 of a harvester unit. Absolutely insane. So you can have a Hive Tyrant with a Tyrant Guard, which just heroically intervene for free, and then fight first and really kind of mulch something before it is able to activate in the way that your opponent wants to do. It's a huge trap to set up, and phenomenal stratagem. Phenomenal enhancement. Makes me really excited to run the Tyrant Guard and Hive Tyrant Brick. Then we have Biophagic Flow in the bottom left. While within 12 of a Harvester unit, that unit can regenerate 9 inches instead of 6. You're pretty much going to use this enhancement every single time. It's only 10 points, and you just want to slap it on a character that's going to be sitting in the back and just regenerating, helping your Harvester units regenerate over the course of the game. That 6 to 9 inches is a huge, huge change in the range of that ability, and I think it is a must-have in the detachment for sure. And then last up, we have a really crazy name, but this enhancement adds 1 to the unit's strength for melee weapons. And then if that unit destroys an enemy unit within 6 of a Harvester unit, you're also going to add 1 to the attack characteristic of those melee weapons as well. So Gene Stealers with strength 6 is pretty insane. And then if they are able to kill something while within 6 of a Harvester unit, then you're going to have 50 attack Gene Stealers. On the other hand, Tyranid Warriors with strength 7 and possibly 42 attacks just off the Warriors is just a phenomenal buff as well. So if you're able to pull off that enhancement and jump through the hoops, killing something within 6 of a Harvester, it can be very, very strong. Let's talk about why I'm talking about Assimilation Swarm now as opposed to a year ago when the Codex came out. It's because the data slate changes. First up, Harvester units don't have to be on an objective in order to regenerate. That was something that was really tough, honestly, for Harvester units. They used to have to be on an objective, control it, I believe, as well. And then they would be able to regenerate. Now it's just they regenerate, which is huge. That is a huge quality of life change for Assimilation Swarm. Being able to just do that all the time really, really helps for you to not position yourself in a way where you're just going to get, destroyed, mollywopped off the board immediately. Because I definitely feel like that was a play pattern that could happen before, where you were forced to put things on objectives, and then your opponent would just sweep you off those objectives. So very, very nice. I really love that change for the detachment. Next, and it's just very simple, Norn Assimilator now assimilates. Yep, the Norn Assimilator, whose name is closest to the detachment's namesake, can be in the detachment and can function with the detachment. That's fantastic. That's awesome. That's very cool. It's a very good unit, I think. I think there's some builds around it, and it definitely allows for a different kind of play for Assimilation Swarm. So both of these changes are huge for the detachment, and I'm excited about playing the detachment now, and I think a lot of people are as well. All right. Now, before we get into all the cool combos and stuff, I just do want to point out some weak points for Assimilation Swarm and why it maybe has not been the best attachment throughout the edition. First up, I've touched on it before. We have a limited number of Harvester units, and in order for this detachment to really do anything, you have to have those Harvester units. So you're not able to fully spam an entire army full of Harvester units and really just fill up your army list with them so that everybody's activating it all the time. I feel like that's not the case with a list, something like Vanguard Onslaught. You have so many Vanguard Invader keyworded units that you're just able to fill up your list no problem with all of those units, and it's just a cohesive army list. In addition, you could do that, especially with the Norn Assimilator. You could just do triple Norn Assimilator, double Psychophage, double Haruspex, and then a bunch of Pyrovores, and that's probably a list already. However, those units are not the best in the Codex, and this detachment definitely runs into the problem where it wants to buff or support or has to include units that are just not the best. So I don't think they're necessarily the worst units in the Codex. However, it's kind of just buffing a unit that is not great as opposed to just giving support to units that are already strong. And that's why I think we see a lot of players kind of migrate towards invasion fleet, because it's just going to buff everybody all at once. um, Assimilation swarm is very cool. However, we have to jump through hoops in order for our units to get better, and sometimes those units that we want to get better are not necessarily as efficient as other units that are in the codex. um, and then that kind of brings me to my last bullet point: is the units the detachment care about are just buffing other units. So you're bringing psychophages, you're bringing harspexes maybe, and power wars and stuff, and those are kind of like the units that you have to bring, right? But besides the lethal on fives, really all the support is going to your other Tyranid units, because you're probably going to be regenerating, Gene Stealers or Tyranid Warriors or your Tyrant Guard or other things like that, as opposed to bringing back. I mean, bringing back a Power War is pretty strong as well. But I just feel like it's kind of weird. Like, you have to bring these units, and these units help your detachment function. But then, really, at the same time, you're also kind of, supporting the units that don't have the keyword, which is weird. Um, and last but not least, it's not necessarily a problem, but just kind of a footnote to include with the detachment, is positioning matters so much in this detachment. You 100% absolutely have to be just bang on with your regeneration auras. You have to know exactly where all of your units are. This is a detachment where I think it is very, very key that you practice your deployment and your movement before you play a game, so you understand where your pieces can move, and having those auras spread out so that you are able to regenerate and support the units that need it efficiently. I still love the detachment. I'm very excited to play it a lot, but just some things to note before we get too much into the combos and everything within this video. In order to kind of guide us with our list discussion and our list building, I kind of wanted to take a step back and kind of rank the first four original harvester units and where I think they kind of fit within the detachment, as well as just their data sheets alone. And we'll talk about the Norn in a moment as well. So I've split them up into tiers because everybody likes tiers, right? We are Tyranids, of course. Oh, sorry. But first up, we have the Pyrovore. I think the Pyrovore is relatively durable, and especially if you put it in units of 3, then you're able to regenerate these very durable Pyrovores with full wounds, and just kind of be a problem. They have a strong ability with anything that it shoots at, then you ignore cover. So it's really good, especially if you're bringing like Exocrine as backup ranged fire or something like that. And then it can regenerate into its own unit. So it's a harvester unit that can just kind of support itself by bringing back models wherever it is. And I think that's really strong in itself. Just bringing back a 40 point. It's kind of weird how they do the split now. It's like 40, then 70, then 105, I think. But bringing a 30 to a 40 point model back every command phase, every one of your command phase rather, this is very strong. And I think that the Pyrovore it's a good unit. I'm running it in other detachments besides Harvester. Besides Assimilation Swarm. So the fact that we have to run it in here, I'm just shrugging. And the only thing that's disappointed is my wallet, honestly, because those guys are expensive. Next up, we have the Psychophage. Psychophage is durable. It buffs other units by giving a 6-up Feel No Pain. A 6-up Feel No Pain is not something that you count on, but it's something that you're happy that you have. Because, you're going to roll 6s, believe it or not. You will roll 6s, and it will probably be annoying for your opponent. I don't think it's going to break the game. I don't think it's going to make something like a Ripper Swarm be indestructible all the time. But however, it does have the chance of just making an attack -1 damage. And when you put that into effect, when you have a big squad of Tyrant Guard or Hive Tyrant or something like that, then it can be a huge problem for your opponent. So, and they're just hard to kill because they themselves have a 5-up Feel No Pain. That's good, And the fact that they're going to have to probably choose between either the Psychophage or the unit that your Psychophage is holding hands with in the center of the board, that's pretty good too. Because if your opponent activates their entire gun load into a Psychophage instead of a Hive Tyrant and Tyrant Guard, then I think you're sitting pretty. I think that's a pretty good scenario. You'd be sad to see the Psychophage go, but honestly, you have a hive tyrant and tyrant guard. They're right there. So I like the psychophage. Haruspex is in B tier, I guess, in this small tier list that we have. Haruspex regenerates well. It triggers multiple stratagems. You can do the crits on 5s, which is phenomenal. I think that's a great idea to do. In addition, you can also do the one where if it kills something, then it regenerates, because the Haruspex, if you're using it right, is going to kill stuff. So it's really, really nice. And then it's a great distraction card effect. I really like the idea of a Haruspex and a Psychophage running up the board together, hanging out, and then just taking over an objective and then just kind of mulching from there. Seems really good. The only problem is you just have to get him there, and staging him and then getting him to charge, it can be oftentimes a little bit difficult. So, if divulge your game plan around where your Haruspexes are going to go and how you're going to get them there, and then I think you should have a good time. But otherwise, maybe leave them out of the list. I think a Haruspex is a great strategic reserves or a rapid ingress option. You can just pop up somewhere where your opponent is not expecting. It can really do a lot of damage. C tier is Rippers. I think Rippers are actually good. However, I'm not super, super excited to run them. Like, yes, you could have one or two that just sit behind a wall and regenerate a bunch of times. However, in my list building, especially with the couple of builds that I've been going with, like a Norn Assimilator and then a Hive Tyrant with Tyrant Guard, your points add up very, very, very quickly. So the last 25 points is tough. And in my opinion, sometimes it's really hard to include Rippers. In addition, if your opponent has any kind of indirect at all, including if they just have a Biovore, there's a pretty strong case that they're just going to shoot your Rippers from behind a wall, and then they're dead. They also don't have any OC, so they can't really stick an objective or hold a point or anything, and can't really perform actions. So your Rippers are just going to be there. If you regenerated in your movement phase instead of your command phase, I actually would like Rippers way better, because you could deep strike them somewhere, and then they could automatically regenerate, and then that would help a lot. However, where they are and how slow they are, I'm not super, super excited with running Rippers, and the 25 points is actually quite a bit of points for an assimilation swarm list. So I think if you have the space, include one or two, just as those little cheeky, funky regen points. Otherwise, I'm not in love with them. This is why everybody's here, I'm sure. What does the Norn bring? The Norn can be an assimilation swarm now and can regenerate. What does that do for us? Well, it's an anchor unit, and I'm going to talk more in detail about anchor units later on in this video, but basically it's a unit that is going to come out, is going to demand for your opponent to deal with, or your opponent's going to have a really bad day. It's going to have 15 OC on an objective. It's going to have a 5-up Feel No Pain, possible 4-up Feel No Pain, with a 2-up save. It's very, very, very strong. Does not have an invulnerable save, but honestly, with T11, 2-up save, that is pretty durable, and it will take quite a bit of something looking at it in order for it to die. In addition, now it regenerates, and it regenerates all the time in your command phase. You don't even have to be on that objective. You should, but it's going to regenerate, and that's going to even help that durability and stuff. You just have to survive into your command phase. It's a large amount of OC, and honestly, with Assimilation Swarm compared to other Tyranid detachments, I think that is one of the things that they are missing on. There aren't just like this large amount of space for a whole bunch of objective control to be in the list. So the fact that you're not having to, dedicate one of your 2 Gargoyle or Hormigaunt squads to a flank because you have a Norn Assimilator there and it's going to have 15 OC is actually a very large boon for the detachment. I'm very happy about that. In addition, it's a good unit. It is fast. I actually like the way its base is, because you are able to stage it pretty carefully behind a lot of GW terrain, and then you're able to jump out and just be on that objective as well. You can pretty easily plan out turn 1, it being on objective, especially if you go second. However, with my Norns, I typically like to run them how I'm using them as a counterpunch and then like an anchor point from that. So you wait until your opponent puts something out on the objective that you've chosen, and then you kind of use that unit to allow for your Norn to charge onto that objective, and then hopefully for the rest of the game it stays on that objective and your opponent can't do too much. If you just send your Norn out turn 1, then your opponent is going to be able to look at it with its entire army, and at that point there's a pretty strong chance that it dies. So just a little food for thought, just thinking about that. And then last is, I had the idea of replacing the second Tyrant Guard and Tyrant Brick. So there's a build that has been running around. Craig from Maelstrom Gaming, I think he kind of like pioneered it, or at least he's been running it a lot, where it's a Hive Tyrant with 6 Tyrant Guard, and then you have a Swarm Lord with 6 Tyrant Guard. In my opinion, this is a pretty good alternative to just having him instead of one of those 6-man plus the Hive Tyrant Bricks. It's going to be actually a little bit cheaper for you. I think you save close to 200 points, and it's going to allow you to have a little bit more action, a little bit more scoring units as well to help your army list fill out. So I think that's pretty cool, and that's definitely the direction that I'm going to be testing my list. I'm currently working on 6 Tyrant cards, so I can try a list we'll talk about. So I really like the Norn. I think he's really cool. Is he too many points? Does he not convert enough in a game of Warhammer 40k? In my opinion, I don't know yet. I have to test him quite a bit more before I can confidently say one way or the other. Sorry. This, in my opinion, is the most important slide in the entire video. It's just basically my overall philosophy and my thoughts on how to run a simulation swarm, and kind of guiding your gameplay as well as guiding your list making in order to kind of make this detachment hum and succeed. First up is pick your quote unquote anchor units. Excuse me. I'm having a tough time talking today. But an anchor unit is basically a unit that is going to either stick on an objective, and it's going to be a really hard time for your opponent to deal with. In addition, it has a good potential to deal quite a bit of damage to your opponent and in the units that your opponent has out there. And you want to pick 1 to 2 of these durable units that gain value through regeneration and can also delete units. So things that I was talking about, like the Hive Tyrant with Tyrant Guard, bringing back a Tyrant Guard every single turn is very, very good. In addition, with some of our stratagems, if you're able to kill something with that brick and then regenerate another Tyrant Guard, that can be a pretty tough blow, especially since they are toughness 8, and that's tough to deal with. They should have a 2-up save though, but that's a different discussion. I think a Norn is very good as well because he can go out there just by himself. He's going to have a 5 of Feel No Pain if you are able to position him correctly onto his objective. It also has that potential for the 4 Feel No Pain if you want to spend it on the Norn. And there's a lot of things in the game that die to a Norn assimilator. It has those really, really strong punches, and then also those pretty big claw punches as well. In addition, it offers for some pretty good anti-tank as well with its ranged harpoon. So that's another example of a pretty good anchored unit that I really like. With those anchored units, having an escort of 2 durable harvester units, maybe 1 behind line of sight and then 1 right next to it, is something that I think of is especially if you're staging your Harspexes, maybe have the Psychophage right next to your anchor unit. If you have a Psychophage on one flank with a Norn Assimilator, and then another one on a different flank with a Hive Tyrant Guard, that could be pretty cool. And then if you have Harspexes or Pyrovores directly behind them, ready to still regenerate, even if any of your models or if your Norn gets damaged at all, that's a pretty strong combo because you're just forcing your opponent to deal with too much all at once. And then with these anchor units, keep them close to your army. I think this is definitely a detachment that really, really likes castling up like that, where everything's nice and close and supporting each other, and really don't commit these anchor units out of range of harvester units unless you're sealing the deal. If you're like your Hive Tyrant charging a unit off of an objective and away from your harvester units is for sure going to win you the game, then of course do that. However, otherwise, I would kind of play a little cagey with it and make sure that they are safe and secure as opposed to committing in a way that could damage them, Next up in our overarching points for kind of our philosophy is protect your harvester units. If they die, you don't get the detachment. Basically, you're playing tier units without detachment. If you're running all of your harvester units out and they all die immediately, um, then I don't know, you're just playing Tyranid data sheets at that point, which can be kind of tough. So be careful, really plan out when your harvester units are going out and when they are dying, and it's sometimes tough to plan when your opponent is going to kill your units, but if you at least have a thought in mind as to what units are exposed and what units are still protected, I think that's a good way to think of it. They do regen, and I do think that the regenerate is a powerful ability. However, they can't regenerate if they are dead. So keep them alive, you know? Out of all the detachments, I think this one, maybe Crusher Stampede too, but this one embodies for sure the absolutely all or nothing philosophy, which means you're either sending out every single unit in your army and kind of taking over the board, or you're not really committing anything at all. So that's something to think about, because I think the strength in Assimilation Swarm is if your opponent is forced to split fire or is forced to dedicate different units to different spots all at once, then it is going to allow for a very strong regeneration turn on your next command phase. So if you're taking control of 2-3 objectives and you're just swarming it with a Psychophage, with Haruspecs and a bunch of Pyrovores and stuff, it's going to be pretty tough for your opponent to kill all of those off. So there's a pretty good chance that you'll have at least one or two of those models, hopefully both of them, or those units still on the objective and able to regenerate and then regain some value from that. So a pretty strong possibility. So when you're thinking about this, hide one or two harvester units within regen range, of course, so that they are able to support those units that are just going cowabunga. And measure out and plan your biophagic flow, especially if it is your go turn. I like putting it on a neuro tyrant, so that way it kind of has two support options. It's giving out synapse, and then it's got that 12-inch bubble of that extended regeneration range. So make sure that is in range of pretty much your entire table, if possible, so that in your next turn, after you've committed everything, you're able to regenerate and gain back any value that your opponent has taken from you. And really, do a good job of forcing your opponent to kill one unit or none. All right. Whatever unit that you send out there that you think is going to deal the most damage on the subsequent turn to your opponent, pop the 4, feel no pain. Really make your opponent commit so many resources in order to kill that one unit, so the rest of your army can kind of chill, regen any chip shops that have taken it down a little bit, and then really kind of force your opponent to a bad time. And that kind of goes with, don't give them easy options. Don't put just a squad of Pyrovores on an objective. Pyrovores are durable for their points, I think, at least. But if they're the only thing on the objective, if they don't have that 6-up feel no pain from Psychophage or something like that, they're going to die 100%. So don't just give them one thing on an objective. That's like early on in the game, maybe put a Lictor out there or something to force your opponent to come out, and then kind of attack the objective with like 2-3 units all at once. And I've talked about this inadvertently quite a bit, is use the buddy system. Psychophage with Tyrants or Norns, giving that 6-up feel no pain to Tyrant Guard is very, very nice. And then having a Psychophage next to a Norn is just annoying, because the Psychophage is going to just do annoying things, get in the way, and your Norn is just going to do Norn things. So if they're able to walk together, and just do harvester things while taking over the board, I think that's a successful way to play the game. We've talked a lot about anchor units within a Assimilation Swarm list, basically just these strong, high-value units that are able to take over objectives, really deal a good amount of damage, and then regenerate and gain a lot of value from regenerating. So I wanted to take a second and define 4 anchor units that I think could be a strong part of an Assimilation Swarm list. First up, we have the Norn Assimilator. It doesn't need to have a harvester unit to babysit. I know I just talked about Psychophage and a Norn Assimilator running up together. That could be pretty annoying for your opponent. However, it doesn't need to do that because it has the harvester keyword. Every single turn, it's gonna be able to regenerate if it's just by itself. So that's a very strong case. And then if you think about all of these other anchor units, it is a pretty comparable, pretty competitive point price range. So I actually really like the Norn Assimilator for one of these anchor units. In addition, it hits pretty hard, and it tanks pretty hard too. You don't even need to spend a CP. You just need to position well in order for it to have a 5 feel no pain while it's on the objective. Um, so I just like it. I think it is actually pretty efficient for its points in Assimilation Swarm. Then we have the Broodlord Gene Stealers with the Parasitic Biomorphology. It's hard to fit that entire enhancement into that table right there. So, but you have Strength 6 Gene Stealers. Oh my goodness. That is very, very, very strong. You know, Custodians hate to see it. You love to see it. So it's a huge breaking point with Strength 6. And then it's also going to wound Toughness 10 and Toughness 11 things on 5s instead of 6s, which is just phenomenal. I love that. Incredible. And possible 5 attack Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers really, really are just a blender unit. And especially if you're able to check that box of killing something within 6 of a Harvester unit, they're going to take over the game. However, they're awkwardly fast with Harvester units slow. Like, yeah, Psychophages move 8 and the Annoyance move 10, I believe. However, but they're also big monsters, so they kind of have to go around terrain, so it does make it a little bit awkward to position sometimes. But Gene Stealers definitely check the box of they are great to regenerate. Any Gene Stealer that you're able to just regenerate and gain more value from is just a huge buff for you in a really sad phase for your opponent. Then we have the Tyranid Warriors with the kind of a similar spot with the Parasitic Biomorphology. These guys are definitely a glass cannon. I definitely would recommend rapid ingressing these Tyranid Warriors because they're going to kill something and then they are absolutely going to die. Unless you are overwhelming the board all at once and you're giving your opponent a bunch of bad choices for different units to attack, the Tyranid Warriors are going to go down pretty quickly, which is honestly why I like the Gene Stealers a little bit better with that 5-up and Vuln. Now, but Tyranid Warriors are going to shred almost anything. Just like we said, the Gene Stealers at Strength 6 are very strong. Tyranid Warriors at Strength 7 is, that is a very, very good breaking point because then we're wounding T12 on 5s, especially with Twin Linked. Yeah, that's a very strong breaking point, and I'm really happy that the Tyranid Warriors are able to have it. Tyranid Warriors also, if they get 7 attacks apiece with, you know, the sustain hits, re-rolling 1s to hit, and then Twin Linked, they will for sure just dice anything in the game. That is just ridiculous. And again, they will die to a Stiff Breeze, in my opinion. And they're hard to regenerate. If you are able to regenerate them and get one more Tyranid Warrior, which would be 7 attacks, that's pretty good value right there. Last but not least, and probably my favorite one of these anchor units, is the Walking Hive Tyrant with the Tyrant Guard. It's very durable and can carry fights first with the instinctive defense. Of course, all of those other units can carry instinctive defense as well, but I just don't think they're, you know, I guess Gene Stealers with fight first would be pretty gross. Try it out. But anyways, the Hive Tyrant definitely carries it pretty well because it's durable and it's like this extra blender unit that your opponents don't want to deal with. I think Tyrant Guard are probably going to regenerate because it's going to take quite a bit to activate into and kill 6 Tyrant Guard all at once. So there's a pretty good chance that you will be able to regenerate at least one of them back onto a point or something like that. The Hive Tyrant's going to give really good stratagem support. With the free CP, we have some pretty powerful stratagems in this detachment. So it's exciting to see a unit that is going to allow us to do that more often. Assault Pyrovores, that seems pretty cool, you know? And if you have Pyrovores that are helping out your Tyrant Guard, they can just assault, run up, and then they have a advance in shooting 12-inch flamer that is gonna, I don't know, kill some infantry and then also Overwatch. Seems pretty good. And they hit pretty hard. This is definitely one of the cases where I agree with the double Hive Tyrant build. I think I'm going to be running Bone Sword Lash Whip and then the Monstrous Scything Talent for my Hive Tyrant when I'm playing this detachment. I think you should too, because with the 10 attacks and then you're able to do lethals and stuff, it's just a lot of Hive Tyrant coming at your opponent. So pretty cool options, pretty cool ideas for the Assimilation Swarm. Key combos, some of these things I've talked about already, just kind of like recap a little bit of the video before we talk about the list that I'm excited to run. First up, we have the Sacrificial Broodguard Impulse. You know, if you are running Rippers and I think you have to build Rippers into your list with this idea in mind. If you're running Rippers, you could charge them at something that is for sure going to kill a Ripper. Your opponent has to activate and has to attack back. not attacking a unit in engagement range, or not attacking while there's an enemy unit in engagement range is not an option in Warhammer 40k. So they would have to kill your Ripper Swarm. And then you're able to pop the stratagem so that maybe there's a really durable unit that you want to take out, and then you're +1 to wound against it. Then you have a blender unit, either the Tyranid Warriors or the Gene Stealers with parasitic biomorphology. We kind of talked about those breaking points previously in that slide. I think that's a really strong thing to do, a strong combo. I personally am leaning towards the Gene Stealers more than the Tyranid Warriors, but I think both have their play and both have their strategies and can have the potential of absolutely demolishing anything they look at. Hive Tyrant with the Instinctive Defense. I think a Fight First Hive Tyrant sounds terrifying. That's miserable to deal with, especially if they're on a point, and they're not able to be shot at effectively. So if you're able to set that up, that's a very, very strong play, and it can be very, very annoying for your opponents. Power specs, secure biomass, just so many attacks, and being able to do lethals on 5s with all of those attacks is very, very strong. So if I'm running a hard specs, that's kind of something that I'm wanting to do with that stratagem. Remember, you can regenerate onto a point during your command phase to steal primary, especially if you have some of those models that are higher OC. Even if you're regenerating, gargoyles, you can do it. And then steal primary. You regenerate gargoyles, that's free 6 objective control onto a point. Pretty disgusting. You can definitely swing the primary in a very good way for you. Psychophages, they're great at distracting. They kind of just tank everything and then annoy your opponent. Don't really kill anything, but they just live for a long time, and your opponent has to put an annoying amount of either high elite or some kind of anti-tank their way in order to absolutely kill a psychophage. And then you could probably spike with 5-ups on your 5-up Feel No Pain, and then they're still alive anyways. So incredible. Then the enhancement, Biophagic Flow, Aura, and Hidden Harvesters. So 6 inches is kind of hard to hide harvester units behind line of sight blocking terrain, but when you extend that 6 inches to 9 inches, in my opinion, I think you definitely are in the case where you can hide those harvester units pretty easily. So if you're playing KG with your Neuro Tyrant and spacing out that 12-inch Aura, and then allowing for a 9-inch regenerate bubble, that's incredibly, incredibly strong. So I'm excited about using that. It's going to be a little bit tough to set up. You have to be very careful with where your positioning is, but I think that is a strong combo as well. And last but not least, not really a combo, but just kind of a reminder, the army wins by locking down primary and grinding out the battle. If you are able to just take full control of the board, really just slamming things on objectives all at once. If you have a turn where you put both of your anchor units on 2 different objectives and you support one other objective or something like that, and you really just push all of your big durable bugs out onto the battlefield all at once, it can be a huge problem for your opponent. It can really set you up for a very successful high scoring game. This is the part of the video where I normally advertise for the stream in a cheeky, kind of funny, cute way that might annoy people. But instead of doing that, I just want to thank you for 4,000 subscribers. Wednesday Night Warhammer, we're at 4,000 subscribers. Incredible. Honestly, most of us didn't even think that something like this was possible. Most of us on our team, that is. And the fact that people are liking the stuff that we do really, 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 it brings a smile to my face. And I'm happy that you've been hanging out with us. If you would like to join this incredible journey of bugs and rolling some fun dice, subscribe. Hang out with us every Wednesday night. Here is the harvester, the assimilation swarm list that I am testing out first. So I will talk a little bit about it, but let me go through it first. I have 2 characters. I've got the Hive Tyrant with the Instinctive Defense that I've been talking about. Then I have the Neuro Tyrant with the Biophagic Flow. He's going to be able to just kind of run up and give that big buff to a whole bunch of units. And he's also durable himself with a 4-up invul. So he's kind of a cool piece, and I really like him carrying that enhancement as well. In addition, we also have 2 gargoyles, 10-mans. You know me, and if you've been a part of our Tyranid list review streams, I like 2 10-man gargoyles. That's pretty much just the basic necessity for most Tyranid lists. that I see out there. And this one is no different. In our other data sheets, we have a Biovore, double Exocrine, because I do think that this kind of list, even though we're swarming the midfield, I do think that this kind of list, you still need some kind of back range support, and Exocrines do it very well. Especially in this, you could reserve one and then have one on the table, pop it out, and it also helps your Norn Assimilator hit on 2s, reroll 1s. It's a pretty strong combo with its ranged harpoon thing, because the worst thing you want to do is roll Snake Eyes on something that absolutely has to die. Next up, we have 2 Harspexes. I'm going to be honest, this is the part of the list that I'm most skeptical on with the Harspexes. Do I really need the Harspexes? Because one of those Harspexes could be a 3-man Pyrovore squad instead of a Harspex, and then I would have 20 points left over. So Harspexes are kind of on the chopping block. I do really like them. They're just hard to get places, if I'm being honest with you. So I like them for testing. I'm going to test them out for like 3 to 5 games and see where they are, and then I will come back and adjust this list, I think. Then we have 2 Lictors. Lictors are going to do Lictor things. They're going to score secondaries. They're going to initiate trade wars, etc. They're very strong at what they do, and I love having at least 2 of them in pretty much all of my lists. Then we have the Norn Assimilator. Trying him out. I think he's really cool. I have one commissioned by Your Next School Mini, which I love dearly, so any excuse I get to put a Norn on the battlefield, I'm going to do it. That's going to be awesome. We have 2 Psychophages, just kind of annoying distraction card effects that also buff like my Tyrant Guard, and also buff like my Pyrovores, Harspexes, and etc. with that 6-up Field Night Pain all the time. Psychophages are great at making your opponent choose between killing the Psychophage, which they kind of really don't want to do because the Psychophage doesn't do too much offensively, or killing the thing that is going to kill them. So giving your opponent that question is very nice. I really appreciate having them around, especially with 95 points. They're kind of a steal right now. If they came down just a little bit more, that'd be really nice, but I think they're a cool add to army list. And then we have 2x2 Pyrovores. Honestly, something that I'm lacking is I would probably prefer one of those squads to be at least a 3-man, but for right now with this list, because I really did want to try the Harspexes, we're going 2x2. The first thing that I would do is probably drop a Harspex and go 2-2-3, something like that, and then kind of test it from there. Maybe only have 1 Harspex in the list so that I just automatically have that as a strategic reserves rapid ingress play. Could be something to look at. Maybe I will do that. We'll see. I don't know. But Pyrovores, I think, are one of the better units in the detachment. So I think you want to have at least 4, and then I think 7 is probably the sweet spot. But we'll see. This list is a little bit fun with the double Harspex. Last but not least, we have 6 Tyrant Guard hanging out with the Hive Tyrant with Instinctive Defense. They're going to go up the board, make it really hard for your opponent to deal with an objective, and then just kind of be there and kill stuff. So I really like them as well. They're tanky. I think there's a good question of splitting what weapons that you have. If you do like 2 of the Lobster Claws, and then everybody else with the Scything Talons, so you have a little bit of anti-elite infantry killing, and then you have some chaff clearing with the Tyrant Guards. I think that could be a pretty good option, but play around with the weapon options and see what you think best fits the rest of your list. That's the list that I'm going to be testing. I think it's a fun one. What do you think? Talk about it in the comments. Like and everything. Alrighty, everybody. Those are my thoughts on Assimilation Swarm. What do you think? If you disagree or if you agree, let me know in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for 4,000 subscribers. Absolutely insane. We really appreciate all the support. I hope you have a great holiday season and a wonderful new year. Thanks for watching. Bye.